Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? Hi, I'm Nathan Mercero, CEO of Planning Alternatives. We're a disruptive brand in the financial planning space with a point of view that true wealth has nothing to do with money. Growing up in a small town in Canada, I experienced examples of families with money and without. It started me on this journey of understanding wealth and the idea that spending a day in a canoe with someone could be one of the best investments you could make. Join me as I sit down with leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, rule breakers, and friends to discover their perspective of true wealth. And maybe you'll start to shift yours. Well, I'm delighted today to be joined by Bridget Crocker. Bridget is an acclaimed adventure travel writer, river explorer, and author of The River's Daughter. Bridget, great to meet you. Looking forward to hearing your insight. Day in a canoe is a metaphor for relationships, but you have much more deeper and vast experience in literal river excursions. So maybe you could share with listeners a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nathan, for having me on your podcast. I'm a fan. I've listened to all of the episodes and just love what you're bringing to this space of wealth and thinking about it differently. I've spent a lot of time on boats, lots of days with folks in boats on rivers, which is my favorite thing to do. I had the great opportunity of growing up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I grew up south of town on the Snake River, just right on the banks, and developed a relationship with the river very early on, which led me to a career in river guiding and also writing. And just being on the water and with people and sharing that experience is, for me, one of the greatest versions of wealth that I'm familiar with.
So what drew you to that? Was it the connection to nature? Was it leading people outside of their comfort zone? What was the why that motivated you?
Well, for me, it was, it initially began as a way to just get some respite from the things that were happening for me in my upbringing. And there was this amazing cottonwood forest, which is still there. Actually, half of it is still there. The other half has been made into a takeout, which is bittersweet because I love that people are able to access the river and connect. But having my sledding hill and half of that cottonwood forest be kind of turned into a parking lot is a little bit sad for me. But yeah, it was a place that forest was a place where I could go and just, catch frogs and listen to the river and really kind of be quiet and alone with nature. And in that kind of meditative state of playing quietly next to the river and being in that forest, I had the experience of being able to communicate with the river. And I heard Jane Goodall do an interview once where she talked about, she was asked, if she loved going into the forest by herself or taking other people into the forest to connect with the chimps. And she said, when I take people into the forest, I have the experience of being very worried about them, and connecting them with nature. But when I go by myself, I am able to disappear into my surroundings and become nature. And that was certainly true for me too. And so this relationship that I built with the river ended up turning into a career as an international whitewater guide. I started guiding on the Snake when I was 20 years old. And then I got a job guiding on the canoe safaris on the lower Zambezi in Zambia. And from there, just, parlayed that relationship with rivers that I had into a career that took me all over the world, where I was able to connect with people from lots of different cultural backgrounds and learn from that experience, and also be put into contact with people in opportunities spanning different socioeconomic backgrounds as well.
I find the attraction and draw to nature so compelling when you're experiencing it alone or with others. And I often think about how nature's been around longer than we have, but we spend a lot of our energy as humans to create schedules and to build infrastructure and to create this container of busyness and identity. How have you observed either people trying to do that or not trying to do that? Do you have any perspective, either personally or through peer groups, even when you guide people, there may be a transformation that you notice in people. What are some takeaways there?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, typically clients who come on trips are people who are very successful financially and have these sort of big lives and careers. And what's interesting is when they come on a trip, they're reduced, everybody's the same, right? They're reduced to being, what's your survival skill set? How well do you survive in nature? And it's typically the guides who are the alphas in that situation, right? And so there's this sort of jockeying that happens where, you've got people who are used to being kind of top dog and having these lives, but their skill set is not, it's out of context. It's not conducive to being in nature and survival. And then there's this kind of this humility and then this reckoning that happens of, wow, I've spent an entire lifetime cultivating a skill set that doesn't serve me in, biologically the way that we've developed, that we're meant to live in these tribal groups connected to our landscapes. So people have this sort of like awakening of I'm completely out of context, and a lot of people go back and really radically shake up their lives and change their priorities and how they approach life, because we get one shot and nobody, I don't think anybody's been on their deathbed saying, I wish I wouldn't have gone out in nature more, or I wish I'd spent more time not traveling and not connecting with nature. I think it's a regret that people have that they didn't spend more time outside and enjoying just, being in such and especially when you live in a place like Jackson, it's so easy to connect because it's all around us. And that's, a form of wealth too, is access. There's so many people that don't even know that that's available or it exists. And so when they are confronted with like, wow, this is, I could be living a whole different way. It really makes people reconsider what their priorities are.
Well, it's our invitation to people to discover true wealth because money is important, certainly, and security and feeling comfortable with money is a root need, but there's so much more to explore in life that is available. And I think nature is a great avenue to experience that. Now, you wrote The River's Daughter, which is such a powerful title. What's this book about? What does it mean to you personally? And how did you define your story through this book?
Well, The River's Daughter it's a memoir. It's my life story, and it's about my connection with rivers, how it developed. As a girl going into the cottonwood forest to gain respite and nurturing, and I received the connection that I was looking for in nature that I was lacking in my family, and that relationship led me to a career guiding rivers all over the world. And you know, I I had I was really looking for a way to kind of escape my family and my background. And what I found when I traveled to Zambia and, was sort of confronted with all of the same themes and things going on that were happening to me at home, those things are happening in families all over the world. I didn't have a corner on the market in misery. Learning from that, I was inspired to come back and work with my family to overcome cycles of poverty and abuse that had been plaguing our family for generations. And so it's a story about overcoming, surviving initially, and then overcoming hardship to kind of break that cycle and move on.
When you were in those moments that felt dark, dismal, but yet you felt a sense to move forward, tell me about that. I mean, because I think a lot of people want to make change, but they don't know how to make that a reality. And so we get stuck even in challenging situations because we don't know other alternatives.
Yeah, that's such an insightful question. Thank you for that. I was confronted with these situations and I thought the answer was running away from them, but it turns out the first thing that you unpack is yourself and and your problems. And so there's really no running away. There's just, geography. We call it, pulling a geographic, right? You're just changing the scenery, but the problems still remain. For me, transforming that had a lot to do with curiosity, trying to see things from a different perspective, and that's where traveling was, a huge opportunity for me because I could see, I had the experience of learning from the Zambezi River The Nyami Nyami is the river god of the Zambezi. And Nyami Nyami has, this personality that's very angry. And that was something that I had struggled with my father, was anger and not being able to control that. So from Nyami Nyami, I learned that the anger, it wasn't something that he was choosing. It was anger was Hurt's bodyguard in Nyami Nyami's case. It was covering first tremendous grief. And in learning that from that river, I started to be curious about, maybe there's something I don't know about my father. Maybe there's a grief underneath the anger that I'm not familiar with. And when I approached the situation from that different vantage point, I was able to get some different answers that led me on a different path with him. And we were able to change the course of our relationship. But curiosity and willingness to see things differently in those darker situations, it gets you, for me, that's what served to get me out of the rut.
Well, that's profound insight. I personally experienced a personal challenge, and I've thought, well, it's other people's issue or fault, but then it was really a forcing action for me to look inside. A friend of mine has a saying, freedom's an inside job. So if we want
Yes.
truly free, it's not going
Yes.
outward, it's going inward. And it sounds like that's what you started to explore with curiosity. What do you hope people take away from your memoir as they read it?
Well, I hope that they take away hope. I, you know, I know for me, I spent many years ruminating about what my family had not given me, and not really focused on and seeing or able to see in that anger and that resentment of what they hadn't given me. It kept me from seeing what they had given me, which was an extraordinary ability to survive and overcome. And I come from a long line of people who are very strong and great at surviving, for example, my father came from tremendous poverty, and he was able to transform that for our family in a single generation just through his determination and his ability to try things differently and in a different way. So I hope that my book is able to reach the people who need to hear a story about overcoming. I know there's so many people who are struggling with estrangement with their families, or feelings of not belonging, or being on the outside. And, I just want to use our story as an example of how you can change the narrative and change the trajectory and the legacy of your family.
I think what you're sharing is incredibly inspiring, and it's your vulnerability that invites people to walk in a space that many times people avoid, and you had the curiosity and courage to walk it yourself. A question more on I guess, the vision casting of Bridget. If you had an opportunity to do a canoe ride or a river raft ride with anyone, past or present, famous, someone you met, whatever, who might that be, and what would you want to talk to them about? What would you ask them?
It would be my dad. My dad passed away 3 years ago, and you're getting me a little bit teary. I had no, it's great. After my father passed, it's interesting that we're here on this podcast, A Day in a Canoe. After my father passed, I had a dream that he and I were in a canoe together, and he was paddling me, and he was actually wearing this sweater I'm wearing today. He wore to my wedding, and he was wearing this sweater, and he pulled up on an island. There was this beautiful tropical island with fruit and flowers, and he put a lei around my neck, and he said, "This is all for you." And I said, "Aren't you coming?" And he said, "No, I've got somewhere to go. And don't worry about me. It's great." And he paddled off. And so, just the vision of that, that we are creating these legacies of abundance for the next generation and for our loved ones. And it goes beyond this realm. And I loved my father so much. And he was my paddle partner, in so many ways, in overcoming these cycles in our family and being very intentional about that. So I love being here and being able to share that experience and offer hope to people who may not be there yet.
Bridget, your story is incredibly inspiring. Thank you for sharing openly. Your insights, I believe, will help listeners to identify those moments where they need a glimmer of hope, and you provided that. So
I want to thank you for the time that you spent sharing your story and wish you all the best.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing this work. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. To discover what wealth means to you, please take our assessment at planningalt.com.